These are kind of like the secret spy of buttonhole and button plackets. What am I talking about? I am talking about the hidden buttonhole placket, or covered buttonhole placket is another way I've heard it referenced. I searched my closet and I don't have any of these. I might need to fix that in the new year, but what it is it's a shirt that is a button down shirt, a button up shirt, but you don't see any of the buttons. Here's an example that I found on the internet that was sold by a very expensive tailor in New York. And the reason this is a little bit more of a quality shirt, a higher priced shirt, because there's more construction that goes into this and more patterning, obviously, because they're hidden and secret. But you can see in this picture that was part of the same link to this shirt, that if you pull back that placket, that's where those buttons and buttonholes are hiding. It gives it a very clean, nice look on the outside, and it's just an interesting way to have your buttons if you so choose to have these little spies involved in your garment. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I always thought this was a fun pattern when I first learned it, and there is a little bit of a tricky thing to sewing these, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And one thing with this kind of a button placket is you have to have a left and a right side, because with all of that extra folding and hidden buttonhole stuff, you don't want all of that bulk on the other side as well. So we're going to be talking about that too while I teach you how to draft this very cool spy buttonhole covered button placket. So let's get into it. Well, hello there. Welcome to my Creative Costume Academy channel. I am Trisha, your pattern nerd friend, and we love talking about pattern making, fitting, and all things sewing here on this channel. So if you like this kind of thing, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button, and please do a like for me so that I know if you like this video or not, and if we should continue all of this fun stuff. I love to hear from you. So today we're going to be talking about the hidden buttonhole placket. This one is super cool, and we've actually been doing a little bit of a dive down the rabbit hole of buttons and buttonholes if you're new to my channel. So if you want to learn about how to do just regular old buttonholes, you might want to go back a couple of videos. I will make this into a playlist, so it's going to be easier to find if you are looking specifically for how to do buttonholes, because I think this is a fun detail that you can always add to your garments, and it doesn't take a whole lot extra. It's just you have to know what kind of buttons you're looking for, what size buttons you're using, and what kind of, vertical, horizontal, hidden, what kind of placket you're wanting to use. So this one is a super fun one. We've already talked about the basic vertical buttonhole that you find on most button-up shirts, and we talked about the horizontal buttonhole and what you need to consider for that in the last video. Today we're going to be talking about this super fun one where we have the hidden placket. I've just always thought it was so neat, and obviously I need to do this because I don't have one in my closet. Now it is a little bit tricky. There's going to be lots of lines and lots of folding when we get over to the table and I start showing you exactly how to do this. But one thing that always helps me when I'm doing complicated patterns like this, not to say this is super complicated, but anytime I'm making a pattern and I just want to make sure that it's going to come out the way that I see it coming out in my head, is to fold the paper like you're going to do it when you're going to sew. So just make it in paper the way you want it to look when you go to sew the actual garment. And if you have to pin things together, fold things, tape things to see if the shape is really coming out to look like how you want it to look, that is what I find incredibly helpful for me. So I just wanted to pass that along to you, and I'll be showing you what I mean as we get into it. Sometimes you're like, where do I need to put that seam allowance? How am I going to sew that together? And another added tip that I think is especially important for a pattern like this is you really want to think about, how are you going to sew this? You know, what are the steps that you're going to take so that it ends up looking the way you want it to look on the inside and the outside? So those are some things that really help me as I'm working through patterns, and just a little bit of pattern tips to help you that work for any pattern. But we're going to be specifically focused on this hidden buttonhole placket today. So I don't have an example to show you, but we're going to dive right in. I did show you those pictures earlier that I found on the internet, and I think once we start drafting and you're going to see it in paper, it will all start to come together and it will make a lot more sense. So maybe you can try it yourself. All right, let's jump over to the table and check out these spy buttonholes and how we create them. Okay, I went ahead and traced off my front bodice again, and now your pattern might look different, but this still should be the same. This is my center front line. So as with any time we have a button closure, we need to add an extension so our buttons aren't just hanging out on the edge of the garment. So let's again use that example of the 1/2 inch button, even though we're working in half scale, just so we can have an idea of how this works. And you probably wouldn't want to use super large buttons, especially for this application, because they're going to be hidden. And so there's no point in really doing big fancy buttons. They are purely functional at this point. So we're going to go ahead and add our extension. And since we're using a 1/2 inch button, I am going to use a 1/2 inch extension. We talk more about the extensions in the previous videos about buttonholes. If you are more curious to find out why I'm choosing to only extend by a 1/2 inch, you can go back and check out those videos. So I have my extension. So now that is the edge of my finished garment. Now, because we are doing a placket, this is more of a placket pattern draft than it is a buttonhole placement. So because I have 1/2 inch that I've extended beyond the center front, the placket should be the middle. The center front should be in the middle. So the other edge of my placket, because remember this is going to fold over and hide the placket underneath, the other side of my placket should be the same width. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a 1/2 inch line over here. I'll do it in a dashed line so you can kind of see. So that is where my placket is. So when I have this folded over version, I want to make sure it's that wide. So I would suggest whatever you're extending to cover your button, I would make that same line, the same width on the other side. Now we're going to get into the fun part. So now we're going to just start adding random lines. Okay, they're not random, but we're going to add some extra lines. And this is where I gave you that warning about, I was kind of getting a little confused, and then I just started folding it so I really could understand what it was I was trying to create. But I'm going to go through it with you and tell you how much to add, and then I will fold it for you so you can see why and how it goes together and how it's constructed. So now that we know how wide the placket is that we're creating, so in this case, it's about 1 inch, right, on my bodice front, I want to extend out the same amount as my full placket. So in my case, it's going to be 1 inch from the extension I already put on. So I'm going to put 1 inch of my ruler right on that extension line so that I can draw 1 inch away. And I'm not really worried about the top and the bottom right now. We'll deal with that later. And just to kind of show you, because this is what I had to do to really know what I was doing, I'm going to fold this. Okay, and then fold this back. So this should line up with that dashed line that I created. So there's my placket, right? Do we see it? Do we see it start coming together? Now, that next line that we're going to draw is going to be under the placket where the actual buttonholes are going to go. So I wanted you to see that. So we want it to be about 1 inch, but actually that next part of the placket where you're going to put your buttonholes, you want it to be a little bit smaller so it doesn't peek out, because the whole point is they're hidden, right? It's a secret that they're even there. So usually whatever width of your placket, so in our case it's 1 inch, you want to go just a little bit smaller for your under part of the placket. So I'm going to go 7/8, which is just 1/8 of an inch less than 1 inch. So I just did 1/8 of an inch less than this placket measurement. And then I need to do another one of those because it needs to fold back and have that extra structure for the buttonhole. So I'm gonna again do the same measurement of this line. Again, 7/8 in my case. Okay, so this is my placket that's covering, that's hiding our secret spies. And then this is where we're actually gonna put our buttonholes. And then usually I add just another little section so that this can all be clean finished on the inside. So I wanna go less even than this measurement. So I would go about 1/2 of an inch more. And I'll show you, if you're lost, don't worry, we'll clear things up before we finish out. So I'm just gonna add another 1/2 inch past this line to make it so that I can clean finish the edge that I want. So I know that that's the line that I want. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut it, and let's just trace back what we've just done. So we created our extension. We figured out how wide our finished placket is going to be. Whatever that width amount is, we drew another line that's the same width. So that creates our covered placket. The under placket, we want it to be 1/8 of an inch smaller than our full cover placket. And then we do another one that same width. Then we have one that's smaller than even our smaller extension, just so we can catch it inside. It's extra seam allowance so that it's a nice clean finish. So this is how this works. We already know that our placket is there, but our under placket is here. So I am folding on this line here, that first smaller line, that first smaller box line, right? So I folded there, and then I folded here already. So I'm gonna go ahead and fold there, but now it's like, wow, it's so wide. So what you do, and notice, I wanna show you, see that extra seam allowance in there? I'm gonna show you why that's important. So you fold on those two lines, and then you're going to stitch on this line, the other side of your placket inside the body of your garment, so that this placket can fold back this way. Oh, it's not quite lining up for me because these pins are kind of bulky, but we can kind of get the idea. So this is my covered placket that's hiding my buttonholes underneath here. So my buttonholes actually go here, but on the inside of my garment, there's no raw edge. I've caught it with that stitching line. So it makes it a really nice, clean look and clean edge. So you can go ahead and add your seam allowance, which I will do now, and I will show you what the other side needs to look like. All right, so I went ahead and added my seam allowance and cut off my placket while it was folded, as I showed you in the previous video. So this is what we're left with. And I find it, because it's like, what line do I fold on to make this happen? So I write on here, we're gonna fold along this edge, which is the extended edge of our finished garment. We're gonna fold along this line here, so not the extra placket. We're gonna go on the smaller line, so that first fold. And then just so that I can understand it, this is what I do a lot. Okay, I'm gonna fold on that line. Okay, I'm gonna fold on this line. And then you can either write to stitch on this line here, or you could write to stitch on this line here if that helps you, so that that is gonna be connected. And it creates, notice without the pins in there, it's just a little bit like 1/8 of an inch extended over to hide our button placket, just like so. And so your buttonholes would go in here. And when the garment is buttoned up, that's where the buttons would be, and this would go over top of it and you wouldn't see them. They're secret. So the other side, because you wouldn't want all of this extra on your other side, and you could get creative and say, you know, cut here to not have all that extra, but I say, especially with this kind of a pattern, it could get very confusing. So let's look at what the other side would look like. And now depending on whether you're the boss when you're making your pattern, so you can choose which way you want to button, right over left or left over right. Typically, men's shirts are left over right, women's shirts are right over left. So it depends what kind of shirt you're making and whether you want to even follow those rules or not. It's up to you. So when we have the other side that is not the covered placket side, we would have our extension of the button, because this would be where our buttons would go on this side, and then the buttonholes would go on the placket side. And in this case, just to let you know, you would have to do vertical buttons. This wouldn't be a good application to use the horizontal button method. So you would have your extension of the buttonhole width, which we've already decided is 1/2 inch. And then you would want to have the full placket width. So you would have that stability, that extra fabric for the buttons that are going to be sewn to this side. And then you could either just have this be a serged edge, but if we're going through all the extra to get this covered button placket, I would probably add a little bit extra. I just did 3/8 in this case so that I could fold it under and then fold it back, so it's going to have a nice clean edge on this side. And then you would just edge stitch that. You would edge stitch that from in here to close that up, and then you could mark your buttons on this side, and then this is how it would line up. So you would have your buttonholes would connect to your buttons here, and that's how it would look when it was closed. So you would want to write very clearly that, this is the left side, cut face up or face down, however you drafted it. And then this is the right side, and be very clear about which side is which. And I'm not going to get into the buttonhole markings for this. You can go back to that first video and use that as reference. But you do, for the underlap side, you would only need to mark the buttons, and you would only need to mark the buttonholes. Or a lot of times when you get commercial patterns, they'll do like a buttonhole guide for this side, which you could do as well. That's up to you, however you want to mark those buttonholes. But let's just see it one more time finished, so you can see what this covered or hidden buttonhole placket would look like if you wanted to have super secret spy buttons. There you go. One more tip I wanted to add about this, about marking your buttonholes, that I feel like you would probably be helpful. So we don't have our center front line marked on here. So that would probably be helpful. So you could use your needle wheel like this while it's folded and get that marking on here. Now it's marking everything. We really only need it on this one here. So this could be, I'm just going to mark it in a different color so you can see your center front line, and that would be the line where you would mark your buttonholes on. So just to show you one more time, like I said, I find this the easiest way. I'm going to fold it and see how it's going to be sewn. So as it's together, that is where my buttonholes will go. And you would want to probably add your buttonholes while it's like this, so you can get in there and add them. And then you could choose to like stitch down, or if you had a collar, you would stitch that down and you would still be able to get into those buttonholes. Super cool, right? I don't know, I think they're so neat, and it's just a matter of thinking a little bit more and adding, that extra fabric that you need that make it happen. I really love them. Let me know if you're gonna try them. Like if you wanna try this hidden placket, if you've been inspired to maybe add this into a garment that you're working on. You could also do this in the back, although usually I've seen it in the front, because it's to keep that, we wanna use the buttons because they're secure and we like, the button form, but you wanna keep the front really clean. This would work well if you have a very busy print that you didn't wanna break up with buttons. I usually like the look of buttons, and you can have so much fun with what kind of buttons that you use, but this wouldn't be a fancy button kind of a project if you were gonna do it. But I'm curious, are you gonna try the covered button placket or the hidden button placket? And if you've been following along on this button rabbit hole journey that we've been on here on my channel, and you still have a button closure that I haven't talked about yet, please let me know down in the comments and we can continue this buttonhole rabbit whole journey. I would love to do that. You guys know I'm the pattern nerd, so I'm all about it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today. And if you are curious, you want to learn more about pattern making, remember I do have that free pattern masterclass. That link is down below. We are actually going to be coming up with a new free class here pretty soon. So you'll have that to look forward to, but we have that one right now. And please hit the like and subscribe button. That really helps my channel and helps me keep bringing these videos to you. I appreciate all of you for watching and spending your time with me today. That's all we have for you, but thank you for watching and I will see you next time.